But when parents don't know that during the first year or even 16 to 18 months, there are so many developmental changes, then they start doubting themselves. And moms think that if their child is not sleeping, it means that they are bad moms, they're not doing a good job. So just putting it out there and telling them, okay, manage your expectation. It's not realistic that your child will sleep through the night at 4 months, and learn healthy sleep habits from day one, because in reality, sleep is a skill and your child needs to learn it, to know how to apply and to create a sleep schedule and to create a bedtime routine and to stay consistent. Learning the tools from day one is so important to know what you're dealing with and to avoid so many different mistakes and challenges.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Wellness for Life. I'm your host, Niki Wolf, and today I'm thrilled to be joined by Shani Avidar, an infant and toddler sleep coach, lactation specialist, and a mom of 3 little ones. Shani helps busy families with their sleep challenges, providing effective tools for baby sleep training, better sleep habits, and helping parents feel a lot more confident along the way. She's also dedicated to supporting new moms through their breastfeeding journey. Shani, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I'm excited. We're starting to pull on a lot more conversations with motherhood and parenting and children. And so I think these conversations are so important. I have a little one and one on the way. And so I'm very familiar with some of these sleep challenges. And so I'm excited to kind of provide this for our listeners. But I'd love to hear a little bit more about your background and what inspired you to become a sleep coach and lactation specialist.
Oh, for sure. So there is a lot of education that we get during the prenatal stage, but nothing about infant sleep. So for almost 20 years, I was in the financial industry. And before becoming a parent, I always envisioned my husband and I as, professionals, full-time jobs, and being those cool parents. But once we had our first child and we didn't know anything about sleep, we were exhausted. And I had to go back to the office after maternity leave. And I remember it was so hard to function. And I started researching sleep. And within a few days of researching, I started applying the tools that I learned. And my child was sleeping. And I was so passionate about it. I researched more and more. I ended up getting certified. And I started my business parallel to banking, where I was at the time. And I did both full time for a few years. And at some point, I just felt like I wanted to educate other parents. I wanted to help other sleep-deprived parents. So I decided to leave corporate America and just focus my time on my business. And I also wear 2 hats where I combine my corporate America knowledge. And because I know how hard it is to have the expectation to go back to the office after maternity leave and being not able to perform as before, I do some speaking engagements at different organizations, and I try to raise awareness from employers' point of view, how important it is to support moms, mainly because most likely whoever wakes up at night is mom. And then the expectation for her to go back to the office and continue to perform as before is very not realistic sometimes. And also when we look at performance evaluations, the differences between men and women and salary increases, then we're starting to see the shift between men and women. So I like to raise awareness and educate employers about the importance of supporting moms when they go back to the office, and also just to educate moms how to give their children healthy sleep habit from the start, and then they can avoid all the challenges that come in toddler years.
Absolutely. And the toddler years are wild years, and I'm still kind of in the beginning of it. But I see how this is so important, not just helping the parents. Probably a lot of your clients are particularly moms, but even working all the way to the workforce and having these conversations with employers. I think that's so needed. Now, in regards to sleep challenges, what do you find to be some of the most common sleep challenges that new parents face?
So I think lack of knowledge is mainly moms don't know what to expect in the first year. And then you go and you see your pediatrician and social media, they create that illusion that your child should sleep through the night when they're around the 4 months mark. And that is not realistic. To tell your child that at 4 months they should not be eating during the night is not realistic. And realistically speaking, your child should sleep through the night around the 9 months mark. But when parents don't know that during the first year or even 16 to 18 months, there are so many developmental changes that they start doubting themselves. And moms think that if their child is not sleeping, it means that they are bad moms. They're not doing a good job. So just putting it out there and telling them, okay, manage your expectations. It's not realistic that your child will sleep through the night at 4 months, and learn healthy sleep habits from day one, because in reality, sleep is a skill and your child needs to learn it. And like adults, children have different needs and they have different schedules. And in the first 16 to 18 months, the schedule will change pretty much every month. So to know how to apply and to create a sleep schedule and to create a bedtime routine and to stay consistent, nutrition is a big part of sleep too. So whether you are breastfeeding or formula feeding, it's important to know, first of all, if you're breastfeeding, some kids nowadays have allergies. And that is a sleep interrupter. So it's really important to detect it pretty early on. So to avoid eating certain foods. If you're formula feeding, it's very important to know what the ingredients in the specific formula are, because many of the formula in America are really not something I would give my children. If you read the ingredient list, cane sugar is one of the first on the list. And basically you're giving your child sugar and then you're surprised that they're not sleeping. So there are certain formulas that I recommend. Americans are not one of them. So nutrition is a big part of it. When your child starts taking solids, protein is high on the list. And it's very important to be mindful of what you give your child at a certain time of the day. So before bedtime or as a snack, you really need to put a lot of emphasis on protein. And then psychology is also a big part of sleep, because the words that you tell your child and your state of mind as a mom both play such a big role. If a mom is anxious and is irritated, your child will mirror your behavior and there is no way they will fall asleep. So some moms that, experience postpartum depression, that would affect their children's sleep. And it's like a cycle, they are depressed. They don't want to deal with what their child is going through. And then they don't sleep and they get they sink more into depression. So just learning the tools from day one is so important to know what you're dealing with and to avoid so many different mistakes and challenges. And I always like to say my ideal client will come to me when she's pregnant, because then you just learn what you need to do and you just avoid all the challenges. I have 3 kids. They are 2.5, 3.5, and 5. So I was literally pregnant for 3 years. So of course I wanted them to sleep, but I also needed them to sleep. And all of them slept through the night around the 9 months mark. And even before, when I say your child will not sleep through the night when they're 4 months, it doesn't mean that they would wake up every half an hour. It might mean that they would wake up once or twice a night, and that's great. You can actually function. But more importantly, I think it's so crucial to know how to plan your day. And when you know what time your child goes to sleep, what time they nap, then you can work out, you can have lunch, you can plan your day and take care of yourself too. Because if you don't take care of yourself, you definitely cannot take care of others.
Absolutely. And I think, I think it's somewhat known that kids inherently want structure and these boundaries. It's healthy
Definitely.
for them. And so having consistency built in where they know, okay, at this time, and maybe obviously they don't really have an idea of time, but even if you start a routine where whether it's bath time, brushing their teeth, they start getting the idea and putting it together that this is initiating bedtime. One thing I did want to clarify is you mentioned sleeping through the night. And I feel like for all kinds of people that could look different, and obviously depending on how old the child is, sleeping through the night could look a little bit different. But when you're saying that, are you referring to 8-hour stretch, 9, 10, 12? What does that look like as far as 12 hours?
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
So around 9 months, let's say bedtime would start around 6:45, 7. So that means a wake up would be around 6:45, 7 in the morning.
Perfect.
So
I think a lot of times new parents I knew when I was going into this, you hear 12 hours and you're like, oh my goodness, like that's so much time. But that is generally what the child needs, especially as they're growing and developing. They need so much sleep. And I think I've heard, and maybe correct me if I'm wrong, between bedtime and naps, they need about 14 hours of sleep. Is that correct?
yeah, so it really depends on the age. So the first 3 to 4 months, we're pretty much slaves to their needs. So that's why I always say, don't come to me when your child is 2 months and tell me, oh, they're not sleeping, or just hire a night nurse to sleep train your child, because most babies in the first 3 to 4 months would wake up every 2.5, 3 hours, because their stomachs are so little, they need to eat every 2.5, 3 hours. So there is no way for them to sleep more than that. Around the 4 months mark, that's when we want to start putting them on a schedule. And like you mentioned, kids love to be on a schedule. Mm-hmm. They love predictability. And it's great for us because you can also create that routine, but talk to them, tell them, oh, even, if they're so little and you think they don't understand, they understand. So tell them, oh, this is what we're going to have for breakfast. Even if you're breastfeeding, even if you're giving the formula, describe their breakfast, describe your activity. If it's tummy time, if you're going for a walk, if you're taking them to the park, just talk to them as if they were adults and tell them what the plan for the day is. And that adds to their predictability. They understand. And the more you talk to them, the more you'll see change in their sleep. And eventually when they're older, you wouldn't need to be, so verbal about it. They will just, like my 3-year-old likes to say, Mommy, we know the rules. But it's like they already know the routine and they love it. So yeah, I just think every month in the first 16 to 18 months until the child goes to a 1-nap schedule, that's when we usually transition to a 1-nap schedule. Then schedule changes. So at first, in the first 3 to 4 months, they wake up every 2.5, 3 hours. Then around the 4 months mark, when we start putting them on a schedule, then they take 3 naps during the day. And then we change it to 2 naps. And then eventually we transition to 1 nap around the 16 to 18 months. And that really depends on the child.
Absolutely. Now, especially for new parents, if they're busy and they're back to work and there's a lot on their plate, a lot of times they can feel overwhelmed. So are you able, or can you walk us through maybe an ideal or simple strategy or routine that the parents can implement to help, their little ones sleep better throughout the night?
Yeah. So, like I said, the schedule is key and consistency. So even if you're sending your child to a daycare or you leave them home with another caregiver, you can tell them what their schedule should look like and follow up with them just to make sure that, the child did go to sleep at a certain time. I usually recommend starting bedtime 15 minutes before. So, for example, if your child should take a nap at 9 a.m., start, going into their bedroom at 8:45 and change their diaper, feed them. So at 9 a.m., they would be already asleep. And let's say they wake up at 10:30, then they go and play, they have lunch, and the next nap is around 1 p.m. Start 15 minutes before, so at that time, your child is asleep. And then every month, the schedule itself is different, but it's so important to be consistent and just to stick to the schedule. And, sometimes life is life and nap cannot be in the crib, and it's fine. Then either the carrier or the car or the stroller. I have clients that are moms to multiple kids, and we have to take drop off and pick up into consideration. And then sometimes the child just doesn't want a nap, and that's okay too. Don't freak out. If a nap should take around 90 minutes, and sometimes the child would sleep just 30 minutes, it's okay. Adjust the full nap, and just go with the schedule. Continue and be consistent, and the child will follow.
Fantastic. Yeah. My little one was never a great napper, but the good news is she's always in a good mood, even despite having very few naps. But I do think it's important to kind of start, giving those signs that we're getting ready for nap time. We're getting ready for bedtime. I absolutely agree with that. Now, what about parents who are dealing with multiple wake ups at night? And this is outside of, those early months where they need the feedings. This is when they're a little bit older, developed, they can actually make it through the night, but now they're dealing with multiple wake ups. Is there a realistic first step that they can take to kind of improve their baby's sleep?
So yeah, that's why. So for me, same. I had 3 little ones. My husband travels a lot, like 80% of the time. And so I did have to deal with that. But, it also changes very often, because if you start applying all the tools and you're consistent with their schedule and talk to them the way you should talk and explain what the day is going to look like, then there is no reason for kids over 10 months to wake up during the night. So that's why it's so important to start so early to avoid that. And I know there are always hard moments, and I always told myself everything is temporary. So don't think this is going to last. Every day looks different. Every week looks different. And all my kids at 9 months started telling me, "Mommy, night night." They wanted to go to their crib. It's not, I didn't even need to convince them to go to sleep. So the earlier on you start, the better sleep habits they learn, and it works. It's amazing how it works.
Absolutely. Now, I'd love to transition to another topic that I think is important for new moms, and that's lactation. And having a lactation specialist is such a valuable resource. I joined a mom's group early after giving or having my daughter, and you have different experts coming in, and it's such a valuable asset. What would you say are some of the top things you would recommend to support a smooth breastfeeding journey?
I think, first of all, listen to your body, because sometimes you really want to breastfeed and your body is not really giving you the milk that you need. It doesn't, it doesn't support your goal. So be able to adapt, and if you need, transition to formula, and that's fine too. And just take all the pressure and all the what society and social media create, take it into consideration, take it with a grain of salt, because for in the 1940, when formula came out, that it was so trendy to give formula to babies. So everyone was giving formulas, not that many women breastfeed. Nowadays, it's much more trendy to breastfeed. Not everyone wants to and not everyone can. So just do what works for you and just be able to either follow your plan, or, and if it doesn't work, just be able to find an alternative.
Absolutely. One thing I heard too that absolutely was so influential for me prior to having my daughter, I can't remember who told me. They told me to take my pump into the hospital with me so that the nurses could actually, because when you're first time mom, you don't know what this contraption is or what's going on. And not just that, you might be able to, smart enough, savvy to figure it out, but to know the sizing of I can't remember what it's called, the cup or the funnel, you might make a guess, but the nurses can, I brought all my equipment in and they were able to set everything up, show me how to do everything. She actually measured for the funnel or the cup and had me open up Amazon, order the right size right there. So I think it can even start as early as delivery, where you can start getting this practice and implementation. Because, I thought it would be a pretty seamless, makes sense kind of thing to breastfeed. And, I had a lot of questions. And I think one thing too is not everybody, this might be the scenario. And I'm curious with you leaning on your spouse. Because I think, and I hear so many different things from women, and I think mothers generally do take on a lot. I think we were given this gift and this skill. We are naturally nurturing. I think we have inherent skills that lend us this ability to be caregivers. But I know something that I've had to communicate to my husband, is I need help with this. I need help like washing the parts or the bottles, because I've heard so often that, well, that's the mom stuff. Like, I think there's opportunities for spouses to get involved that can assist to make this process a little bit easier, because a lot of the times it is the mom getting up in the middle of the night. And this isn't a bag on husbands or anything. It's just like, how can we work together? How can we communicate better to support the whole entire family? And I'm curious, do you have conversations with husbands? I mean, are any of the clients coming in, both partners are coming in at the same time? I'm curious of how you handle situations like this.
Yeah, I definitely have conversations with both husband and wives. And many times mom would wake up at night, but then when we do the sleep coaching session, we do use dad many times to go into the child's bedroom at night, because sometimes the child feels more comfortable and then they prolong the wake. So with dad, it's actually faster. And, recently I went with my family to Israel and my kids were sleeping perfectly, even with the jet lag. But the first night, my youngest was not sleeping amazing. So I did use my husband. I told him, go inside. And within less than 10 seconds, my child was calm and he went back to sleep. But so dads do have a big part of it. And even myself, when I had 3 babies at home and when my husband was home, I would do the night wakings with the youngest, but I asked my husband to wake up in the morning and take the 2 older ones, because, it's hard when you wake up during the night to actually wake up at 7:30 in the morning. So you have to see what works for your family, and then divide and conquer, because like they say, it takes a village. In the past, there was a village. People would stay next to their families, but nowadays everybody moves to different countries, different states. So most people are not even near their families, and not everybody can afford to hire help, and it's fine. And you just have to find the solution that works for your family and your schedule, and be creative, but also don't let it put you down. So sometimes we kind of like try to take, especially when we are sleep deprived, and we try to take things out of control and say, well, this is exhausting. I can do it, but everything is temporary and it's just take it day by day. I think that's the most important lesson for me as a mom, that hard times are going to still come. I mean, like they say, young kids, small problems. We don't know what the future holds. But it's very important to be able to sleep. That's where I come from, because I know that when I sleep, then I can do much more for my children.
Absolutely. I think sleep is so monumental, and especially with littles, it's hard to do that. But I think there are a lot of variables in our control. For instance, my husband and I get in bed every single night at 8:30 p.m. And that might sound very early for some, but I know my daughter wakes up at 5:45, 6 every single morning. Like that's just what it is. And I know if I am not getting, 8 solid hours of sleep, and I'm pregnant right now, I need plenty of sleep. So I talk to so many people, and, they want to watch TV after, unwind. And ultimately, I think it comes down to priorities. And sometimes we have to pull back the things that sound fun for the things that our body actually needs and restorative. And it is hard in the beginning to make that switch. And I also think I'm very blessed to have a partner who is on the same page with me, because I talk to so many people, and their husband goes to bed at 11 or 1 o'clock, and so it'd be easy to stay up with them. And so I think communicating and trying to get on the same page to support, I think the unit is so important. Now, again, for these parents, new parents, or parents with multiples, again, it could feel very overwhelming. And so your sleep coach, why would a sleep coach be, a helpful tool for these families? Because, we can get information online, but why specifically to interact and engage with this family? Is that a helpful thing?
I think when you sleep and your husband sleeps, and it's good for the entire well-being of the family. So if as parents we cannot function, then what are your kids going to do? They rely on you to take care of themselves. And you, if you don't sleep, you really you cannot take care of them. So I think just to create a schedule and structure for families, especially for multiples, because it is hard to wake up for multiple kids at night. And for some that their kids go to school, to wake up in the morning and prepare lunches and all that and function. And for parents that need to go to the office and perform, it's just hard to be able to function if they don't sleep. So I like working with families that have, more than one child, just to see how we can create a schedule that fits the entire family. And sometimes, like you said, like you have to skip the fun stuff to go to sleep early and get your 8 hours of sleep. So I applied it on, with my own self. Just in the first 16 to 18 months, I would skip some events that would have been fun, but I did want to keep my children on a nap schedule and to go. Even today, when they're older, they do all go to sleep by 7:30. And, even if we're out and about, I make sure that they're still all in bed by 7:30, because I also want to have the evening with my husband, the evening to myself, and just get my 8 to 9 hours of sleep.
Absolutely. And I think, when we go into this idea of parenthood, or we're getting pregnant, I think having the right mindset, of this is going to be difficult. There's going to be incredible blessings, and it is going to be the greatest gift that you are ever given. And I think motherhood and fatherhood are the most important roles in life, but it's also going to come with challenges. And I think having this expectation and really sitting into, I will be sleep deprived, or it is going to be very challenging. Because again, I talk to people and they're almost overwhelmed of how difficult the situation is. And to your point of a village is monumental. I couldn't imagine my life and raising my child being this good without the support of a village. So if you have the opportunity to be around that, press into that. I think it is incredibly valuable. And what a blessing for the children to have all these different family members and friends help raise your child together, I think is incredible. And so I understand that not everybody has that sort of a privilege, but I think going in knowing this is temporary, like you said, like this will be fleeting, it'll be time, and we'll look back, in 10 years and miss some of these moments. I heard this, I don't know if it was like a quote or something, but it was a reminder that when your kid is freaking out, going crazy, you're exhausted, to just pause, close your eyes, and imagine yourself, 80 years old. And if more than anything, you would crave and wish for this moment of a toddler in your arms, screaming, not sleeping, you would take that over anything else. And so just kind of sitting in that this is such a temporary moment, I think is helpful. And again, leaning on parents or leaning on your partner and asking for help, I think is so important. But I love that you brought that up as far as, this is fleeting. This is a short amount of time. I think that's so valuable. In regards to kind of sleeping or even napping, is there any sort of advice you have for naps? Because, for instance, my daughter sleeps great throughout the night. 11 and a half hours, napping is not so great. So what about other families who are also struggling with this? Because my neighbor, her kids sleep 3-hour naps. I'm like, what in the world? Like that's, wild to me. Do you have any advice for parents who are struggling with naps?
So I think it really depends on the age of the child, but generally speaking, the more your child would sleep during the day, the better they would sleep through the night. But we're talking first 2 years of life. So older than that, it's okay. Some kids transition to no naps around 3 years, but some would do it around 2 or 2.5. And also, I don't know, your neighbor told you her child sleeps for 3 hours during the day. You don't know how much they sleep at night.
They sleep 12 hours at night.
So
they're sleepers.
They're sleepers, but it's great. But then I also take everything with a grain of salt, because maybe one day the child slept for 3 hours and then the rest is 2.5. And that's very normal. Mm-hmm. 3 hours is a little bit, too much. But it might happen. But That's why I say every child is unique. Every parent is unique, and every couple has different parenting styles. So when I work with a family, I always want to hear about their day-to-day life, their parenting style, what they like. I want to feel like I live with that family. And when I give them tools, I always say, try them. If it works, great. If it doesn't work for you as a parent or for your child because of their personality, tell me and we can adjust, because every person is different. And, I have 3 kids. They're all different. I've done different things with them, and even their beds are different. So it's very, and like us, because we're all human. So it's very important for me to learn the child as a person, as a human being. And then we create, a personalized sleep plan for them, and even a sleep environment that is unique for them. And I know, the baby industry, especially for new parents, is so overwhelming and so expensive. And I see all those Facebook posts about, what's the best stroller? What's the best crib? But the best for who? The best for, it really depends. Where do you live? What your parenting style is, and are you a walker? Do you drive a lot? Do you have to? In Miami, we have those bridges that are very narrow, so we need a narrow stroller. It really depends on so many variables that, when someone asks me for a recommendation, that I start with a conversation and tell me. The more you tell me, the more I can recommend. But So it's the same with sleep. It's just the more I know the human being, the better the sleep plan is.
Absolutely. It sounds like not being afraid to try things out. If something's not working, try something new, see what happens with that. Shani, this conversation was so valuable and I hope provided a ton of insight for new parents or parents that have multiples that are still struggling with sleep and even lactation issues. Where can individuals find more about you and the work that you're doing?
I'm on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and YouTube. I try to share as many tips as possible. I think Instagram is my most favorite platform. So it's my little dreamer _coach. And I even have Ask Me Anything Tuesday. So on Tuesdays, you can just ask me anything and I'll answer you. But you can always DM me and I'll answer you too.
Fantastic. And before we wrap up, what would you say is the most rewarding part of your job working with families?
I think when a family comes to me and they're just so sleep deprived that, I give them all the tools, but after 2 or 3 days, their child sleeps through the night and they're just so rejuvenated. It makes me happy. And I recently had a couple that came to me with their 2-year-old son and they were just not sleeping for 2 years. And after working with me, they decided to have another baby. So that felt very good to me.
Oh, I bet. That is incredible. Because I know when we made some major switches with our daughter and it took a day or two, we felt like completely new parents. Like we had life, we had this time. I can imagine and see how that gives you so much more hope that, okay, we can do this again, or even excitement, or just like a zest and love for the family and for each other. So what a cool, powerful testimony to hear. I can imagine that was pretty special to hear. But well, thank you so much for being here, Shani. I really appreciate everything that you've provided. And I hope this has helped some of our listeners who are struggling with any of these sleep or lactation issues.
Thank you.
All right. Until next time, chat with you soon.